Well, so yesterday I was back at the clinic on the other side of the fence, out with the anti-choicers. Since I'm the only person out there with them, I think it's important to tell you what I observe and what I experience. Just a reminder, I don't support the women and Planned Parenthood because I like abortion. That's ridiculous. It's like saying I like cancer surgery or any other invasive medical procedure. What I think or feel about abortion, what I believe or don't believe about it, is irrelevant. Women have the right to make choices about their own bodies. An invasive procedure is serious, and so is the invasive kind of faith-based assaults we witness all the time at the clinic that patients have to endure. Well, there may be nothing quite as bad as using personal faith as a weapon in the name of love or in the name of God. Loving your religion and your God more than others, especially those who don't believe the same way you do. And one of the best, that is, worst, places to see this on display is at a Planned Parenthood clinic. The harmfulness of weaponized religion is palpable there. No sense of humility, of admitting ignorance about someone else's life decisions. Now, as I've said in an earlier Substack post, I volunteer as a clinic greeter twice a month and then go back each month to stand outside the fence among protesters, the so-called pro-life believers. I don't go as a counter-protester, just a supporter of women coming to the clinic. Simple as that. Well, this month I didn't intend to have any conversations with protesters outside the fence, just wanted to hold my sign. Aurora, the most vocal anti-choice lady, was there with her husband. He's more aggressive and accusatory in his attempts to incite an angry response, and I think it just bothers him that I don't engage him. I've often seen Aurora, and that's not her real name, and I listened to her preaching through an amplified speaker for several years. Think about it, an amplified speaker directed at the women in the clinic. Usually she stands at the property line in front of the Planned Parenthood sign, but I've also seen her on a ladder looking down at women coming and going from the clinic. They're good at that tactic. You get that, right? Looking down. Ironically, she told me she doesn't like hypocrites, without realizing to be a hypocrite literally means judging from above, looking down at others. I've heard her shout at women saying things like this: God doesn't want you to murder your child. Please, Mama, don't kill your baby. She'll say this even when a woman is walking with a small child. Talk to us. We care. We do this out of love. God wants us to protect the children. Babies are being murdered. Planned Parenthood just wants to tear your baby apart. Nice things like that. They're passionate. They're passionate. Well, damn it, since it wasn't a busy morning, Aurora approached me and asked if I'd have a conversation with her. I stand with my signs just across the driveway from their perch, where they can spy on every woman coming in and out of the clinic and approach every car entering or leaving the parking lot. Now keep in mind, Aurora regularly films vehicles and women and volunteers like me, and sometimes posts those on her Facebook page. This shows no respect for privacy. Well, she had questions and wanted to hear what I had to say. And after initially telling her I didn't come there to have a conversation, she began explaining why they were there while her husband kept a close eye on our conversation. She couldn't wait to tell me about her faith. And I finally responded, and I said, well, that's what you believe. I used to believe like you. Of course, that made her curious, but I wasn't going to give more information. As I told her, she uses personal information like our names to try to intimidate, to harass. So I wasn't going to say any more. And oh, by the way, I should say, I was wearing a t-shirt that day with a rainbow image of North Carolina and the words, "No hate in my state." Aurora assured me they don't hate anyone. I replied to her that shouting at people, harassing and intimidating them, and calling them names doesn't exactly show love. Looking her in the eye, I said, "What if people came to harass you at a medical appointment?" Well, she continued about her beliefs that children are being killed in the womb. And I repeated, "That's your belief. It's your right to believe that, but many people don't believe what you believe." And here, with my background, I couldn't help myself. I said, even Genesis says life begins with the first breath. Well, gratefully, she didn't launch into a Bible battle. I wasn't really interested in that right then. Well, she shifted tactics and described what they've done to help women who chose not to kill their babies. And I said, that's fine. If those women chose to make that decision, I have no problem with that. I calmly told her I thought it was disrespectful harassment to shout at women coming to the clinic for personal, private health care appointments. She told me she didn't mean to shout, but needed the speaker to keep herself from shouting with a shrill voice. She wanted me to know that she'd work on that so it wasn't so loud. That she had spoken to another woman protester who she thought maybe was shouting too loud. I pointed out I've heard her call people Nazis. She denied doing that, but proceeded to tell me about Germans taken into the camps after World War II to see the corpses. Horrified they didn't know what was happening in their village. Just like here at Planned Parenthood, she explained. Well, she also recorded herself at another time, telling clinic escorts they're no better than Nazi guards. Well, I wanted to tell her what she and the other protesters are doing is intrusive and intimidating, but she continued to ask questions to draw up more of my own personal views. All I told her was that I used to believe what she does, wanting everyone to believe just the way I believed. When she wanted to know, well, how did that change happen? But all I gave her was the fact that life experience matters. I had to accept that I can't know what someone else is going through to make difficult personal decisions. I emphasize this. None of us knows why a woman is coming to the clinic. How many times do we have to repeat that? No one knows why people are coming there. She asked if I'd been pro-life back in that day. I said I didn't use that word, but was conflicted about the issue of abortion back when I was an evangelical. Well, here Aurora was adamant that most women who come to the clinic are there for abortions. I said, you and I don't know that, and even if that was true, that's a decision between the patient and her doctor, not us. Aurora told me she had a bad back and needed to leave, but thanked me for speaking with her and that she would think of some of the things that I said. Her husband also walked over and he thanked me for talking with them. They picked up their bloody signs, those loving pictures that are supposed to convince people that you really care. Anyway, then they walked off to their car and I waved at several of the clinic volunteers who saw my signs and smiled, and they gave me a thumbs up. Several passing drivers, the ones who weren't flipping people off, because I was standing by those other protesters, I guess they assumed I was one of them, so people were flipping me off too. But several passing drivers smiled and waved. And as I walked back to my car, another young woman in the parking lot smiled at me and flashed a thumbs up. As I got in my car, I was still humming to myself the words that I was whispering while holding my signs up on the sidewalk. This land is your land. This land is my land. I'm not sure why that came to my mind, but it did. Well, I'll be back next month, and I'm guessing Aurora will be there too. Maybe we'll have another fairly reasonable conversation, and that might distract her for a few minutes, to give a few moments of peace to the women at the clinic. we'll see what happens. So those are my reflections on what happened this time. Thanks for listening.